Hereby given the Brookshire Economic Development Corporation hold a meeting on Tuesday, October 23rd, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. in the City Council chambers of the Brookshire City Hall, located at 4029 5th Street, Brookshire, Texas, 77423. First item on the agenda is prayer, pledge to the U.S. flag, and pledge to the Texas flag. Would anybody like to lead the prayer? Not, I guess we'll do the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. U.S. flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. Agenda item number 2, roll call. Ms. Casto, if you will take the roll, please.
President Jeremiah Hill.
Present.
Vice President Kathy Guy.
Present.
Secretary Mariela Aguilar.
Present.
Director Glenn Mayberry. Director Quotacious Dunn.
Present.
Director Suzette Baines.
Present.
Director Amanda Neuendorf.
Present.
You have a quorum, President.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Seeing as there are none, we'll move to agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 4 is the Community Assessment Workshop and 2022-2023 Budget Workshop. Body, how we're going to do this is Mr. Barnes is going to present the results of kind of his assessment. We're going to discuss that, kind of a strategic plan for the next couple of years. And then from that, we'll segue into discussing the budget and what our initiatives are going to be for these next couple of years. So with that, if you'll turn your attention over to Mr. Barnes and feel free to ask questions as needed.
Thank you. I don't think I probably need a microphone. I'm kind of loud, but you will recall, I don't specifically remember the date, but we did sort of what we called a community assessment where we had input from you folks. And from that, I went back and similarly did a fair amount of what I'll call independent research to try to put some meat on the bones that you gave us. And this, Vicki tells me it's a 30-page document, and I said it's a 29-page document, but at any rate, you have that in your packet. Let me just sort of quickly go to, can we go to page 2?
Absolutely.
And I'll try to go through this very quickly. And at any point, if you have any questions, comments, or other. If you look at the major assets, I think it's safe to say that the education and workforce, as we poach from within the Houston region, could be a major asset. The greater Houston market has tons of institutes of higher education.
He's coming around.
Okay. We have very good workforce training skills, very good, how you doing? Good, thank you. Very well-respected, the Texas Workforce Commission and the skills folks that are within that. As referenced there, the Skills Development Fund. The second asset that comes out is just our, by definition, the location. The location within Waller County doesn't mean a whole lot, frankly, but location along I-10 in greater Houston means a bunch. Obviously, Houston's the 4th largest city in the United States. It is, excuse me, an international city. We have access to ports, airports, surface transportation by means of I-10, make our location extremely enviable. And that, I think, if anything, may be one of our best identifiers. The last one and this is just part of the executive summary there, the last would be affordability, and you can see the data there. Brookshire is much more affordable in terms of housing, in terms of doing business, which translates into savings for corporations. That bottom line is always the consensus or the major factor. Can I do it cost effectively in this location or in that location? And affordability with regard to Brookshire makes us very competitive. Questions? Let's take a look at the next one at the weaknesses. You know, for every yin, there's a yang, as they say. I don't know who says that. I typically don't, but I interjected it. Building permit process is perceived as cumbersome, confusing, etc. I think that's, you know, I hear from developers, users pretty frequently. I know some of you weighed in those comments in the session, and I think that is true. The good news is, as best I can understand, there are some strides that council is trying to make to rectify that. So hopefully in time that won't pop up there on that bubble. It's almost a dichotomy to suggest that within the city limits we have a lack of suitable, immediate, and contemporary structures for occupancy. And why is that a dichotomy? Well, we've got Stream at Empire West that has 6 million square feet completed, of which half of that roughly is occupied, near completion, of which half of that roughly is occupied. As recently, what are we? Today is Tuesday. As recently as a week or so ago, could that be? We were briefed that you know, there's probably proposals out on another 1 million square feet of the stuff that's coming online as we speak. I'm aware of that because we've been involved in some of those discussions with the brokers and the user brokerage community. Now, that's that. The dichotomy is once you get beyond that, we don't have a lot of inventory. The reason that we were successful, and put that in italics, in recent years is that we had that inventory to lease, to help sell, to occupy. The good news is that I think when this is completed back at Stream, that there will be another series of buildings that will immediately start. But again, once you get away from that, you know, if we were to go to what I would consider most of you think of as the traditional city limits of Brookshire, we don't have a lot of buildings that are thought of as usable for contemporary usage in the marketplace. Now, again, that's going to change because not, and I sound like I'm the PR guy for Stream, but West I-10 is coming online with a considerable amount of spec space. The last number, I haven't seen the building permits, was in excess of 200,000, I think.
So.
That'll add to the market. I think the market can withhold it, and that'll give us additional product. One of the things that I want to make sure I'm seeing this correctly, the highest occupations for Brookshire residents are service and material moving, production, and transportation. Those on balance, and I don't mean this in a disparaging fashion, and I don't mean this at all other than to be objective, typically aren't the highest paid wage paying occupations. And again, that's objectively verifiable. So what we have to do, in my opinion, is to elevate our workforce in terms of moving them into those higher paying jobs. And to a large extent, that is being completed. Questions there. We can move on to page 5, if you would. Excuse me. When we spoke before, during the cash, you'll recall the factors used by site selectors and corporate decision makers. Their business climate, workforce education, building sites infrastructure, and quality of life. It may not be labeled that way by every site selector, and those are in no particular orders, because different projects would require different things. But if you boil it all down, those 4 factors are really what it amounts to when they evaluate your community. One of the things I thought was interesting, and I inserted this because of the discussion about lack of retail, but the good news that came from you folks at the board level is that according to the ICSC report, very recent, July 7th, retailers will open more stores in 2022 than they close. Now, why is that important? If you read the trade publications or watch the news or talk amongst yourselves, there's doom and gloom is said about retail. Amazon has killed retail. Direct marketing has killed retail. When in fact the data from the source that's the best source, the International Council of Shopping Centers, says that ain't necessarily true. And I just wanted to throw that out. And as we go further, and this is directly related to hopefully the budget discussion and directly related to what you all said you wanted, that's why I'm putting the retail emphasis in here. You'll see that the factors in the highlighted, it's blue on my paper and purple on the screen, but access to households with disposable income, proximity to other retail, access, here's the double edge, access to lower wage and part-time workers, and then competitive real estate costs, and then incentives such as a TIF or sales tax rebates. Any questions there? Quick look at the demographics. Nothing really stands out except, see if I can find it on here. Well, two things. You'll see that our community is comprised of individuals that only 7.5% of those folks have a baccalaureate degree or higher. If you even look at the Texas average, it is 30.7%. And Texas is not perceived by the outside world as being the highest educated state in the United States. There's an old term in economic development. First, I have to ask, are any of you from the state of Mississippi? Okay. There's an old term in economic development called "Thank God for Mississippi." And what's why is that term floated about? Because as we evaluate what I call civilization factors, Mississippi usually ranks 50th in a plethora of categories. So Texas is not Mississippi, but you'll see that even within Texas, Brookshire specifically, we would hope to have a higher percentage of our folks that would have baccalaureate degrees. If site selectors are looking at the matrix for a workforce that need to have at least a bachelor's degree. Again, you'll see where our civilian labor force is employed. Only 12.8 are in manufacturing, which would be construed as primary jobs. The highest percentage there, again, is retail. On the next couple of pages, I just wanted, and I won't go over them, but I wanted you to understand where we work as opposed to where we live, and where we live as opposed to where we work. Make sense? That's as confusing as could be, right? But keep in mind that we need to have, the bottom line on that chart, if you will, is that we need to have more employment opportunities for our citizens. And by no means are we unique. I'm giving a presentation of a similar, a little more in-depth report that we did for another community tomorrow in Central Texas. And great community. Very livable community, very nice community. They're a bedroom community. And the city leadership have recognized that they can't maintain city services if they don't get some businesses in there to support that. And that's, you know, sort of the reason we do economic development for a number of reasons. You can look at these charts for infrastructure, sites, quality of life, business, et cetera. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to touch base with me after the meeting in the future or whatnot. Just kind of wanted, if I could draw your attention to page 12, in terms of how prevalent, if you will, incentives are. I know the guys at the site selection group. How many of you are familiar with the real estate baron, if you will, the Trammell Crow? Is that a name that any of you recognize? Trammell Crow was a major real estate baron and developer, landlord, whatever, in the Dallas market. The site selection group are comprised of a number of folks that were senior VPs, et cetera, within the Trammell Crow, as we used to call them when I worked and lived in the Dallas metro. They were instead of cowboys, they were the Trammell Crow boys. Thought I'd just interject that for fun. But take a look at that. The number I want you to see there in terms of incentives, two numbers. Of 227, is that right, projects, total of 2 billion in investments, the next number ought to jump. And that number is with an average incentive of $150,809 a job. Do you understand what I just said? Folks, that is, to me, frightening. What's even more frightening, read the next sentence. The report suggested that incentives amounted to roughly 20.6% of the capital expenditures. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that, very little. That suggests that roughly 1/5 of the deal was contributed in incentives. Now, when I first started my career in municipal government many, many years ago, there was a program called the Urban Development Action Grant. UDAG. I don't know how many of you have ever heard of it. It was part of the alphabet soup within community development block grants, and those are still around. The city, in fact, I think is trying to pursue those. An ideal ratio of public to private, which is what that figure amounts to, frankly. That 150 or 20.6% is the public investment, okay? We used to have competitive UDAG grants at $10,000 a job. 15 times that today, and rapidly looks like it's going to 16. One thing that I think you should familiarize yourselves with as Economic Development Corporation, I'm not going to read it for you, but on page 12 again, JLL, I don't know if you all are familiar with that company. JLL is one of the leading real estate brokerage site selectors. How many of you remember the legendary Roger Staubach? Staubach's company merged with another company to form JLL. And I have had the pleasure of working with JLL folks in a variety of markets. We would have a project here in Brookshire that was, Vicki, remember that one? I'm gonna have Vicki speak on this one. Okay, I'm sorry. She won't be the bearer of bad news. I get to do that. I don't know how many of you remember the SECA project.
Yep.
Those of you who were citizens at that time and not on this board. SECA was a manufacturer of aggregate, if you will. You can go to Home Depot, Lowe's, other shops of that nature, and buy your 50, 100-pound bag of premix concrete and cement. JLL was the site selector on that. Great guy that ran that project. SECA's not in Brookshire. They're in Sealy, and they've expanded once already. They're near the 3 times? Okay. I know of one. They're located near the Walmart warehouse and distribution center in Sealy. I draw that to your attention to say there are sometimes reasons that projects don't come to fruition. That reason was a political reason. Up front, candid. Our former mayor of the city was convinced they were manufacturing, well, let me rephrase that. I'm not sure he was convinced. He advised many folks that SECA was manufacturing Agent Orange. Enough said on that topic, okay. I'm pretty sure the good citizens of Sealy have not been exposed to Agent Orange as a result of their initial and, as your board president indicated, 3 subsequent expansions. Okay, I'm sorry. But I'm not bitter against that politician. I want you to know that, because don't you laugh back there, because I do not hold grudges against anybody. Here's one of the things, McKinsey, this bright consulting company, it's on the next page on 13, and I just highlighted it there. You know, governments with the most effective business attraction programs deploy, and you'll hear me say this to the point of monotony, comprehensive economic development, okay? That means business retention, expansion, attraction, to hit all 4 of those factors that we talked about earlier, that was the site selection factors. Let's go to 14. Always got to ask this question, you know, in terms of short, medium-term goals. You know, will the leadership take the appropriate action and steps to enhance economic development? That's on you guys. That's not on me. Something I said?
Oh, no.
No. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I've
No.
had allergies.
No. There you go.
In front of you.
No. I'm the least of your worries, I assure you. It sounds like that's nothing, but it is the something. The next point, are you willing to explore other and additional incentives? You know, you all did a very good thing at the last meeting, and that's moving Benito Aguilar's project forward. City Council has heard that project. They acted again, was it this week, last week? Time flies. To initiate moving forward again to provide hopefully the incentive recommendations that you suggested. I'm in contact with Benito every day. And we'll, am I allowed to say this, Mr. President? We'll see how well the county responds to that project. Oh, I think it just slipped right out of my lips. I don't know. They have, their process is a little different from ours. I'll just offer that. I don't recall, unless Miss Vicky did it while I was away, taking $1,000 from Benito before I'd even talked to him. Okay, just checking. I didn't know if he paid you that or not. Okay, moving on. You folks have got to facilitate and develop leadership. You know, and I don't mean this, I'm not pandering, I promise you. I'm not the pandering sort, as most of you probably would agree. But it is refreshing to me to see, and I don't mean to offend you, Madam Secretary, Treasurer, but it is refreshing to me as I stand here and see a diversified group of whether it be race or ethnicity or sex or age, but we've got to have leadership developed that don't look exactly like me. You know, you don't have to be that agreeable. You know, 90% of my career is in the rearview mirror, but that's understandable. Just keep on, you know, you can look at those at your leisure. I just wanted to kind of highlight. Let's go on. Maybe the next page is I think, maybe more pertinent to the budget. And from what I understand, some of this has been done by the city, but develop a strategy to purchase additional land for developmental purposes. One of the things, and I say it's the short term, you know, 1 to 5 years. It's one of the most effective tools is to have control of land. We're fortunate right now that Stream and Empire West is so agreeable to working with us, and they did all that on spec. That was speculative development. That's not always the case, and so at some point it might be worth considering. Take a look at code enforcement activity. If you got an ugly town, it ain't desirable for people to put adult money into it, as we used to say in the Carolinas when I lived and worked there. I think, and you'll see that later on in my assessment, engage partnerships with the medical facilities and their reps. Healthcare plays a significant role today, and it does in this region. Collaborate with downtown groups and agencies to enhance downtown. We've done a fair amount of enhance the branding. Of Brookshire, I think we can do more, and maybe we'll talk about that. You know, something for y'all to consider in the budget. Partnership with the region's academic, you know, one of our strongest suits is our academics, whether that be the local high school, the community colleges, or the 4-year and beyonds. And again, work diligently to identify the markets and market those available sites. Suggest this little box there, join ICSC. I don't know if we've done it, but we should. It's cheap for a public membership. That keeps us up to date. Team Texas is a little different. It's a little more expensive. How do I say this? You know, it's a pay-to-play group, and, you know, you could throw $30,000 at it and still be along the lower level entrance. And I did not even join the governor's Office of Economic Development team because it is extremely outrageous in terms of cost. One of the things that I like and I think are very effective is familiarization tours with site selectors in connection with the allies. I can say that the Greater Houston Partnership has been extremely kind They have included me representing you in the past, not so much with fam tours, but to give us an opportunity to get and pitch Brookshire with site selectors that they bring in, that the greater, so it's at no cost, to Brookshire, other than my mileage and the retainer. Broker developer visits within Texas. We need to probably encourage those. We do some of those by definition because we've got a pretty good network. We know a lot of the greater Houston folks, and we know a lot of the folks in other markets as well. And they, I don't know if you're aware of this, but most of them, some of them receive our monthly newsletter. It goes out to 1,900 contacts, and Brookshire is included in that, and updates on Brookshire's activities is included in that. Code enforcement, again, if please don't put a knife to my throat, but if you did, I would say that's got to be done. The town has got to look better, in my opinion. You have an opportunity to do that. I love this. Collaborate, cooperate, and the three terms that I like the best: you should be creative, adaptive, and flexible. That's the three key terms. On the next page, 16, we talked about how you look at targets. I'm not going to belabel that. Hopefully you'll trust me that I kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. But I wanted to give you kind of the background as to how that's done. The same holds true on pages 16, 17, and 18. Let's go to 19. If you're going to target something, you probably ought to be targeting something that's growing. And so I wanted to show you, as a board, as decision makers, here are those industries that are growing. And to take a look at those, to familiarize yourselves with those. I won't belabor, you've got that in front of you. But there's nothing there that is particularly surprising to me, with the possible exception of the Forbes, and it's a fairly recent data point that I was able to find, travel. Now, whether that is a result of we're all pent up from COVID, but to see a data point of 82% of us are excited to travel in the next 12 months. I travel every week, and I would be excited to rest a little bit, but that's kind of neither here nor there. On page 20, we did the same thing. I wanted to show you, for your reference, if you have your in front of you, region 3 is where Texas is, and you'll take a look there: healthcare, manufacturing, oil, gas, and energy, which is absolutely no surprise if you're looking at that market. Financial services, construction, and real estate. Do you see this common theme? Every data, every source is, almost all are identifying 3 of the 5 or more. One of the things, I'm just going to put this out there for the next page, 21, if you would. Thank you, sir. Is Amazon fulfillment centers. That is an old data, old by what, is it 2 years old maybe? And you see the presence. If you were to go today, it'd be double that. Just as an aside, Amazon made the statement, or one of its senior execs made the statement a few years ago, that by 2030 there would be one of those in every county in the country. I think that might be a little exaggerative, but I ain't all that sure it is. Okay? If you travel interstates, as I do, you see them everywhere. I mean, there are half a dozen of them in the Austin metro market. So maybe what they're saying is true. Again, on the next page, on 22, thank you, you'll see growing industries, projections, and so forth. You see a lot of similarities. And then we start 23 in terms of our actual, what I suggest be our targets. It's broad category, and there's reference in there to Naics Codes, which hopefully none of you will have to memorize. There'll be a test in 2 months. We're going to have a test here. I'm joking, I promise you. Okay.
Well, the new list came out.
What's that?
2022 list came out for the NIC.
They did?
And they messed up my code. They changed
Well,
it for my company.
I'm so old school. I learned, I just about had the SICs down.
Yes, I remember. Yep, no, I know.
You didn't have to say that like it was, eons ago.
It was. I don't lie about my
Then you
age.
get the rest of this, it's somewhere behind and, somewhere. But, boy, I thought I was cooking. 3527, manufacturing plastics, 3620, man, I could, and then they do this. And now they've done that.
And they update because it was 2019, now it's 2022 list.
And-
And then the code changes.
and
But you're the same company.
These are supposedly, because I pulled them from the 2022s. Full
Okay,
disclaimer.
so this
This
these are
should
new.
be,
Okay,
this is
I'll-
old data.
I'll check on you.
If you do it I'm wrong, please don't.
I'll just get my red pen out. Hand it to you.
Please don't. If you do it I'm wrong, I mean, I've done so well.
It's $5.99 a mistake, and then it just goes up after that. That's how she gets you.
Obviously, we ain't bonded yet. Okay. Healthcare. Man, it's growing everywhere. And we're in a prime situation, we as in Brookshire. Look at here's the current model for healthcare. I know a little bit about what I speak because we have done projects for, if I say it fast, you won't throw me out, for-profit healthcare providers. And you know why, don't throw me out, is because even the ones that have the not-for-profit logos, guess who owns them?
For-profit.
The for-profits. Okay. And the modality today in healthcare is very much like airports. The spoke and hub on a wheel. Think of a wheel. We're fortunate in Houston to have hub airport service. United used to be Continental. United has a major hub there, okay? Just as the model, and you'll see it, the greatest example is if you travel the state is Baylor, Scott, and White. If you see Baylor, Scott, you'll see Baylor, Scott, and White clinics dotted everywhere. Well, what they do is route their folks back to the mothership, if you will, back to the hub, to the Baylor, Scott, and White hospitals. Healthcare, that's what's happening. And in all candor, many of the healthcare providers, hospitals and others that you think are not-for-profits or for-profit. And they're managed by not-for-profits. Convoluted? Yeah. But the economy is still. These just give you sort of a large array, if you will, of those targets that fall within that broad, everybody in unison say 62 category. There'll be a test, especially for you if you find any mistakes. Okay, moving on. Retail. We have I-10. When I say retail, internet sales and e-commerce. This is the distribution side. There's no, and the proof's in the pudding. Amazon is in unincorporated Waller County. Costco is in unincorporated Waller County. I mean, so it's there. There's absolutely no reason that we as Brookshire can attract those, whether it be a Wayfair or whatever, into those facilities to do e-commerce. Questions? Then we get straight into the next page, 25, on retail, Naics. Soup to nuts. Who says that, Mr. President? These are soup to nuts retail. I would suspect you'd probably take any and all. I purposely left off X-rated. No, I'm kidding. I did leave them off, but I don't even know if there's That's your challenge.
I'll go look for the
You
code.
gotta go look. That's your challenge. In 2022, did they have X-rated movie stores and whatnot? And I'm not really gonna try to go out and recruit many pawn shops either.
Right.
But those just give you an idea of the categories, and if you look on the right side, the scope, how many marketable U.S. businesses there are there, which I always think is helpful. Questions? Comments? Secondary. You saw in all those data points earlier, construction, you know, that's a secondary target. Construction will follow the market. And I just kind of wanted to make that point. I think, you know, I say on the bottom of 26, retail is a high priority. Our best retail site falls into the category of landowners seem reluctant to move forward in this process. Dare I say that. But hopefully, when you can't get it done that way, you get it done another way. And we're working diligently to get it done another way. Conclusions. Brookshire poaching from Greater Houston enjoys not solid, it's a phenomenal foundation for expanding economic development. Framework is already here. You know, the Type B corporation was adopted by the citizens of this community years ago, probably before our youngest member was born. Yeah, I don't think it's that long ago. I don't know. I'm picking on you, and I apologize, but you strike me as somebody that can take it very readily and equally dish it back. Brookshire should continue its emphasis on youth. Boy, what a segue, huh? And developing the needed skills with our young people. You know, the last checkpoint is real simple. You know, you tell people all the great things and you minimize the weaknesses.
Right.
Pretty straightforward. This might have more budget implications, if I might.
Absolutely.
Timeline. Let's get the building permit process corrected. Make it easy. Another one of Barnes'isms is user-friendly. Let's be user-friendly. Let's get code enforcement enhanced. Make the city look good. You have a challenge ahead of you, your policymakers, in terms of the park projects. You know, this is a policy decision. You know, we might get those off the plate by finishing them and then taking a look at, if I heard you correctly last time, some downtown development, some strategy, ongoing business attraction. I think, you know, one we ought to, and I've kind of done that and will continue if we're here, you know, chasing down some healthcare providers, trying to develop those relationships. We understand that. I've been involved in major healthcare projects, not in Brookshire, but representing the corporation in other markets. Take a look at maybe set aside some money for, still in year one, to kind of set some money back for buying some property, moving forward. Year two, let's take a look at implementation of a marketing plan, ongoing evaluations for land purchases, collaboration with higher ed. In year three, you know, I'm one of these guys that if the mousetrap ain't working, let's rebuild it. So I always, you know, let's evaluate. Year three, let's take a look over our shoulder and see how we did in one and two. If the strategy didn't work, then we modify it. If it's working, let's enhance it and kind of go forward. The last 29 page is just some budget considerations that I would put to you. International Council of Shopping Centers, dirt cheap. And, you know, you might, I would say, if we can get retail properties identified then we should interact with those retailers at the deal-making events in Texas. I am not going to stand here and say that we ought to go to Las Vegas for the annual ICSC show. If you want to send me to Las Vegas, I'd love to. I don't even like Vegas. I'm not a gambler. Getting out of bed in the morning for me is a gamble. But the reason I kind of poo-poo that for us is we'd be competing. You all know Katie Mills Outlet?
Mm-hmm.
You know who the developer is there, Simon?
Yep.
The largest developer in the world. Let me give you an idea of what Simon does at ICSC. All the retailers are going to the private show at Cirque du Soleil. I don't think our budget allows us to compete in that kind of I mean, it's glitz. The deal-making events are phenomenal. You get one-on-one time, speed dating, if you will, pitch your elevator speech, outstanding. Team Texas, consider, you can see the numbers, they escalate as you go up the food chain, so to speak. I've had experience with Team Texas. It's much better. I'm so old that I helped put together the old, what was called Texas Marketing Team, which was the precursor to this. Team Texas, in all candor, was formalized a few years ago because there was concern as to how the state would be moving with the change in election from one administration to another potentially. You know, you're not going to see that written. I'm telling you that's what happened. I know, okay? It's much better today, but it's pay to play. And candidly, if you're interested in that, I'll kick the tires further. But, you know, if we're doing 6 million square feet of space, then we're going to have another 2.3 million to lease or occupy. I don't know what Team Texas is bringing to the table. I think some of it, to be brutally candid, which is my biggest criticism, I think that some of it is a junket, dare I say that, for communities, where they load up their economic development staff and take their board president, maybe the mayor, and they go off to these places and they promote their community. A lot of them are at trade shows and sales and marketing events. I don't like to sell the salesman. There are better ways. Having said all that, it's still something to consider. You know, that's it from me. Happy to answer or evade any questions that you have, or address any comments. And don't ask me about NAICS codes. I'm the one that wrote it. You are the ones that are responsible for memorizing them. Anything?
Everyone a cheat sheet. Make it easy.
Any obvious questions for Mike at this point?
Thank y'all.
Let's turn to page 28, if y'all don't mind. I want to hone down on this and kind of get feedback from y'all on what y'all think of the timeline for years 1, 2, and 3.
I think the building permit process for sure was my number one, and I think it's
Yes.
number one here as well, so.
Correct. And-
Zoning would definitely help.
Zoning will. That's a little more involved of a process.
Oh, yeah, no, I know.
What the city has attempted to do on their end is former council, and it's about to come back to this council, is address building standards. And that's helpful in a lot of ways, but it still doesn't address, you know, to Mike's effect, Mr. Barnes' effect, you know, we're kind of loosey-goosey on what can be used for what, right? And I hate to use this example, but I use it when I'm explaining this to people. If you take your home and there's 4 homes in a row on your block, and let's say you live in home 1 and your best friend lives in home 4, Amazon could have come in and bought homes 2 and 3, in theory, and you had the side of Amazon building between you and your fourth neighbor. You know, and it's not ideal in those scenarios. And that's where zoning would help. We're just not quite there yet as a city. I think there's an appetite for it, but it's a complex process. So we're trying to address building standards. I did meet with our code enforcement, our building inspector, this past week and said, hey, you know, the EDC is going to be looking at what our focus is moving forward. And we need to know that you're going to be out there basically patrolling the streets, so to speak. And when there's obvious violations, we need to get this stuff corrected and fixed sooner than later. I can tell you from my stance, there's probably going to have to be a meeting of the mind, so to speak, between us and city council as well to say, you know, in theory, if we're going to throw quite a bit of money at, say, improving the downtown area, that investment's going to be worth it because it's going to be kept up by public works. It's going to be kept up by code enforcement. Same thing with our parks if we're going to complete those. So these are going to be ongoing conversations. I can tell you this much at least from the conversations I'm having with certain stakeholders, the more accountability we're asking for, the more they're responding to it in a positive way. There's some that are not, and I'm not going to sugarcoat that situation. But the ones that actually want to do a good job and understand the end goal is this is a better looking city for all of us to live, work, play, whatever you want to call it in. There are people that are stepping up and starting to do the right thing as far as maintaining stuff. Now it's a matter of staying on it to make sure we maintain it in the future. What about the parks? What are y'all's thoughts on it?
I would like to see the parks get to a place where it's something that the city can be proud of, and then I would like to see the EDC get out of the park business. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. If we have the money that's budgeted and available, I think there's something that we can do. Now, does it need to be done to the grandiose extent of what's been funneled into Hovis Park in the last couple of years? Absolutely not. I think that was an egregious overspend of funds, but just simple things like making repairs so that we don't have liabilities there. I mean, even though the EDC is separate from the city council, we're also representing the city of Brookshire, and I think that we need to keep in mind of the fact that we're all still the city of Brookshire. So even if somebody gets hurt at a park and it's city council's liability, doesn't mean that we can't influence that in some sort of way, whether that be positive or negative. So at the very least, I would like to see the dangerous aspects and the liabilities taken care of, and then just the parks cleaned up so that they can be used and enjoyed by our citizens and move on.
Yeah, some
the
of the
love.
parks were always maintained by Public Works for years and years and years, and then somehow it became an EDC fashion, and Public Works divested themselves from that.
Yeah.
I personally, I would love to see Hovis Park as the key park, considering it has everything that we would ever need to host an event. I mean, we've got tennis courts, there's soccer fields, there's baseball, you can do everything there. We used to have huge festivals, get-togethers, everything was there for years. I mean, even back when I was playing t-ball.
Well, I think even with the growth of the city, we could even use additional park space. Like from what I understand, we're already behind on green space, and the growth is only coming even more. So even if Hovis was like a key park, and then we have additional ones on this side of the city, I think that's something that we definitely need to be looking towards the future for. I mean, I know I've mentioned my idea to you, maybe to a couple of other people as well, but in terms of like green space, if the EDC is going to be, you know, putting in a substantial amount of money into park space, and maybe that's something that can be in conjunction with city and their budget and their funds. But I've talked about the idea to several other people before, but something similar to like a Mary Jo Peckham Park here in Brookshire. We have a lot of land that is on the northeast side of the city that is prone to flooding, that maybe wouldn't be something that would be good for residential development or commercial development. But if it was something that could be where we had like a city pool, city park space, and then a majority of it even potentially turned into like a wildlife type preserve that could potentially attract different types of grants, as well as exemptions from like Texas Parks and Wildlife or from the state of Texas. But then also be you know, while it's a preserve, could also be educational, could also be beautification, could also be functional, different thing. And those are the types of amenities that are going to attract rooftops. And the more rooftops that we have here, the more retail businesses that are attracted here. We have to work those in conjunction with the commercial that is built. We're not going to get the type of retail that we're looking for until we have rooftops here to support those businesses.
So,
Question.
go ahead.
What was the last project that the EDC or anyone did at Hovis Park?
It was the baseball field. They put turf down on the center baseball field there for the tune of, I think, $396,000.
410.
Oh, excuse me. My bad.
Which could have potentially reworked the entire park.
So,
No, I'm sorry. Because they did do the turf on the field, and
It
then
was
I
on the
think
infield,
after
right?
that, they replaced the roof on the pavilion.
yeah, as
After-
a separate project.
That was a separate project. I'm sorry.
It's still not
The
working.
baseball field, though, was
It
an
is not working.
the baseball field was an effort that was spearheaded. I mean, I hate to say that I was even a part of we weren't asking for turf on the field. It was whenever I was involved in a youth organization. And we were asking for dirt to be delivered to just make the fields playable, and we'd requested that Public Works assist in maintaining those. We had requested that assistance from the city because, well, first we came to EDC and requested it, and the EDC said, wait a second, aren't the parks the city's responsibility? So then we went to the city and said, hey, we just want dirt and for the fields to be usable. And then I guess the EDC heard and they pulled it back. We're like, no, we're gonna put turf. And then there we go.
So, how many of y'all have toured all three parks in the recent
Yeah.
near term? I'm of the same mind. I'd like to see us kind of do a one-shot, fix the issues and move on, and let the city maintain. However, the other two parks besides Hovis need a major overhaul. Both of them. Hovis still has to have the fencing replaced, and the previous board had somewhat committed to this. I'm not sure if it was by consent, meaning a vote was taken, or if it was just in a spoken form. The chain link fencing needs to be replaced there. At Bostic Park, which is off First Street, the EDC actually 10 years ago, almost to the day, purchased the additional field beside it.
Mm-hmm.
And we've yet to expand into that field, so there's more room there. I'd like to see us take that, expand that, potentially add a small parking off of First Street so cars can actually pull there versus be on the side
Not
of the
be on
road.
the street.
I've met with a playground company. There's previous quotes the previous board had from another playground company as well, to redo the playground equipment, to potentially add some workout style equipment as well, and add additional seating, all that kind of stuff. At Lowenball Park, very similar. We don't need parking there. Public Works needs to do some serious maintenance. Actually, last week, they tore out the old pad for the restrooms.
Yes.
So that's been a hazard for many years, and finally they tore it out. So at least that's gone, but we need new playscapes. We need,
And there's a walking path around that park as well, but if it's gonna be there, they need to have handicap access on the corner.
yes. And that's part of,
Something simple, but,
they actually did the cutouts for that if you look, but it never just got poured,
oh,
which is interesting. So it should be a fairly easy fix.
right.
Is there an appetite, before we start looking at hard numbers, that we do something like that? And we look at finishing the fences at Hovis and redoing Lowenbaugh and Bostic Park and getting them both usable, and then saying to the city, we've done our part,
Mm-hmm.
now it's your job to maintain. And based on like Bostic Park, the slide there is the old metal slide,
Mm-hmm.
like the one we burned on as a kid, you know, in elementary school.
Memories.
So it's
Separated the
had
men
its
from the
day.
boys.
Oh, yeah.
It's had its day, and obviously has not been swapped out any time in the last 30-ish years, maybe longer than that. So what is y'all's feel on that?
Are those the only 3 city parks?
That's
Those are
correct.
the only 3.
Okay.
So Discovery Park that's over here is not, owned,
The water district,
the
excuse me, the
the
drainage
drainage
district.
district is the one that maintains that one.
Gotcha.
It was offered to the city,
Yeah.
but was declined.
To give y'all rough numbers, somewhere around 600,000, we should be able to take care of all of that. 6 to 650, somewhere in that that field. We'll look at the hard numbers here in a minute. But just so y'all kind of have something to, so for what they spent on an AstroTurf field, we,
Only the infield.
yeah, only the infield, we potentially could have taken care of 1.5 plus park, you know.
Yeah.
So thoughts on that?
I like it.
Yeah, I say we go for
Yeah.
it.
I mean, I know it's a big chunk of change, and I'm sure there's going to be some scrutiny from the public whenever we talk numbers, but the scrutiny is going to come no matter what. And I think that whenever we can show that, hey, for, like you said, for 25% more, we can do all 3 parks.
Yep.
Well, the benefit is that actually benefits everyone.
Well, and that's the
Not-
biggest thing. Hovis is very much far removed from like your
Yeah.
center of town. While it is the largest park, and I know that there was an effort to make it the nicest park, it's not always going to be the most easily accessible. But yeah, like we said, just to get it done and to move forward, I think would be of benefit to our city.
And it would make it equitable through the city.
Yes.
You know, there are a lot of kids that go to Bostic Park and play basketball.
Mhm.
I put out a survey this past weekend. Some of y'all may have taken that. If not, I'm asking some of the pastors of churches to help disseminate it as well. And no one said they didn't want to see the parks redone. Now, there was dispute in there over what style of park we'd look at. For instance, there's more of the modern play equipment, which has like ropes and that kind of stuff. Majority of people wanted that. There's some that just want the traditional, you know, just a swing and a slide. Some people didn't want playscapes for the 2 to 5 age bracket, but a majority of people did. And granted, Bostic Park, you can't fit everything in that park. It's landlocked,
It's
right?
small, yeah.
Even, you know, Lowenbaugh is landlocked to a certain degree, but it does have quite a bit more land. So there's going to be some trade-offs. The exercise equipment was something that was overwhelmingly wanted in both parks. Now, one park just wanted the main 5-in-1 style exercise equipment. They didn't want a cardio option, which I found interesting. But we've got options which will make it very usable for a wide range of people, not just people playing basketball or people walking the trails.
Is it something that we could explore as well as if we did do all of the parks in one shot, would there be some sort of financial benefit? I mean, as we look at and bid equipment from different companies, some of those, we may want to look and see which companies were contracted by like local school districts in recent years, because they may have more economically affordable prices, or at least we know kind of what they're spending.
Right.
And then maybe if we say, hey, if we do all 3 of these parks at one time,
So the
what would we be
fences,
looking at? Yeah.
the fencing would be held by a separate company. Most of the parks companies don't want to do fencing.
So it's just fencing at Hovis.
Just fencing at Hovis. That would be for all the chain link, the outfields, the backstop, dugouts. That would be all that's really done there. Because the spray park got redone a couple of years ago. Some of the playscapes got done a few years prior to that. The pavilion, the barbecue pavilion just got redone. I mean, it's fairly up to date, with the exception the fencing really needs to be addressed. Now, could we go in there and say, hey, we want to AstroTurf the rest of the fields too? Yes, but is it really necessary? And is it really the best
I
investment
don't think it's the best investment
at the
this time.
moment? At the other 2 parks, to your question on that, there's 2 main park companies, or playscape companies, if you want to call them that. Craftsman, and the other one's eluding my recall at the moment. I've had both of them out to look and to kind of reassess and kind of give us some pricing on that. And so the last gentleman we spoke to thought, just playscapes wise, with exercise equipment for the 2 parks, we'd be somewhere around $550,000 between the 2 parks.
Okay.
Now, that's not including the fencing. That's why I said that 650 range is the fencing, potential parking lot at Bostic Park, and a few other odd and ends. So those fairly solid numbers. But we're waiting on a hard mapping, so to speak, of the parks.
How much of a parking space would they have at Bostic Park?
If we look
How
at,
many cars could actually park in there?
that's what I'm asking Don Mailer. I'm not sure if y'all know him. He's a Brookshire resident, and he's a surveyor. I've asked him to look on First Street, if we take the new property and fence all that in, but make that parking lot right there, how many cars could we realistically fit without taking up too much space? So I'm kind of waiting on final numbers there. So we know if we can be 4 cars, 8 cars. I don't know that we can go quite past 8 cars in my mind. Right now, everybody's parking on the side of the street. You know, so if we can at least get some of them off of there, that would be a benefit. I think to most
The
people.
lady across the street.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Miss
Yeah.
Birdie
Her,
Baker.
yeah,
Yeah.
her
Yeah.
project.
So, and that's kind of the other side too, is if we can, again, not have it there. We can't go any further south on Bostic Park because that's a city easement. There is land across from the easement, but I don't know that it would be for sale. And then you'd have a split park, so I don't know that's even something we would want to,
How much land on
Entertain.
the other side?
I couldn't tell you. I'd have to look it
If
up.
we look at it and figure out the land on the other side is so much and we could fit 12 or 16 cars there, but this land is adjacent and we
Yeah.
could expand the park this way.
She gonna sell.
And I was about saying, we don't even know that it would be
Yeah,
for
sell.
sale.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, but it's something to look at because I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
so,
rather than have to put
Okay.
parking on both sides of the park, you know?
Oh, what are we doing at, I'm sorry, did y'all,
No, please, I just,
Long and Ball, what are we,
it'd be similar, there would be,
The thing is, the playground equipment is like
playscapes.
torn apart.
It's been like that since I was.
merry-go-round?
Yeah.
Looks like a horse.
That's-
I don't think there is a merry-go-round out there, is there?
They
There
took
is
it
the
out?
old school,
Oh,
it's
I
still
remember-
there.
I
It's the
remember
old
that
metal one.
merry-go-round.
That was put in like.
My
grandchildren think it's
So, but even like all of the swings, because I don't know when, like I know there was a handicap swing that was installed. I mean, it was there when we moved here 5 years ago, and it's like, you can tell kids have just like ripped it down and it's hanging,
Yep.
same with all of the other swings, and then like the little bouncy things are like
Yeah,
falling over.
teeter-totters, all that stuff.
So the
The
initial
biggest thing,
discussion.
I mean, like I know we've hit the nail several times, is just we have to have accountability for maintenance, because whenever
Correct.
you go out to the parks and they're full of ants or the grass is high or different things like that, that's not going to, one, make our equipment last as long as possible, but that's also not going to encourage people to use it. So I think we're on the right track on the council side of making sure that we're trying to set up some policies and procedures to make sure that we're accountable for a lot of different things, one of those being maintenance. But it's just a matter of, I think, like to your point, Mr. Hill, that whatever we make a decision here, we have to know that we're gonna have the city support as well, and then accountability for all of it. Because
Right.
we can't just make the investment and then say, okay, we've done our part, and then on this side, they go, okay, great, and turn their back.
Yep. I mean, some of the comments on the survey were, can you cut the limbs out of the walking path
Yeah.
from the trees? So, I mean, residents see it, and it's common sense to us. I mean, if you had to walk through a tree limb every morning to get in your house, eventually you're gonna go out there and knock the dang thing down. So that has to be a discussion. So let's pause there for a second. Develop a downtown strategy. If y'all were not at the city council meeting last week, the city has voted to enter into a real estate agreement with the county and the historical society to purchase the field across the street here, as well as the old Donegan home and the county annex. And so what kind of was the loose discussion, I want to kind of pose it here tonight to get y'all's idea, would be on the Donegan home, which is the old museum, as they call it. The side of it where the doctor's office was, convert that to the EDC office / welcome center, where we can have information on the city. The EDC offices, again, would be housed out of there. The top level of the Donegan home could be restored back to its time period pieces. The Historical Society has all of that, and they have nowhere else to put it, so they're more than willing to put it up there. Phase one, in my mind, would be let's get that building scraped and painted so it looks good. Phase two is going to require that we gut the bottom level. It was originally not intended to be enclosed. It was enclosed some years ago, and unfortunately it's flooded every time we've had a major event. And so it's just deteriorating that area down there. In this field across the street, what we've discussed, and I'd like to enter in that discussion more tonight, would be the idea of putting an amphitheater out there, which allow us to have movie nights, it would allow us to have small concerts, that kind of stuff. It could be a focal point of the downtown to have events down here. So what we could, in theory, look at is on the Donegan home in phase two, which would be, say, year 2, 3, is, again, gutting that bottom portion. There's restrooms down there that could be converted to publicly accessible. Maybe put some seating down there, a small concession stand, so if we wanted to sell stuff during those events, instead of having food trucks or stuff like that, we'd have some options to do that. With that, we've loosely discussed the idea of adding more lighting to the downtown area. And again, trying to make this a focal point and then build outwards from there. We'd potentially have to look at paving a few streets in this immediate area that are in desperate need of paving. And then potentially look further at the idea of creating some sort of loft living type scenario, maybe potentially bottom level retail and loft living, on the top story. What are y'all's thoughts on looking at revitalizing downtown? And then I'll let Mr. Barnes interject with his thoughts on targeting the businesses that are here and trying to get them to,
Who owns the space now?
The county.
the county owns the Donegan home and that annex building, the old county annex. The city would retain the annex for their new records retention building essentially. Whereas that building, we'd have to use the white building, the museum. That could be used for like a tourist type attraction. So there's really not much usable on that unless we wanted to really get into some tricky territory with the existing historical society. And that was one of the first homes built by the Armenian families in Brookshire. And so for us to propose to, God forbid, tear it down, it's going to be kind of an uphill battle to sell that to the masses. Versus the discussion I loosely had with the historical society would be that they staff somebody here as a volunteer on, say, Thursday, Friday, Saturdays, and they could do tours of that facility. Then we could look at, in effect, donations that come back could be put back into the fund to maintain that building. We have options, with that. If we convert kind of that doctor's office, which faces the hardware store, into the EDC office / welcome center, we again have that same kind of opportunity there, is to have books about Brookshire, shirts, whatever. Use it as a show spot for us to bring in businesses and talk to them about Brookshire and that kind of stuff. And I mean, right now, I'm sure Miss Vicky loves her office as is right now, but it's embarrassing to walk back there with businesses and say, hey, let's talk about what you want to bring to Brookshire.
That it is.
Right? So, thoughts?
And that doctor's office, are they shut down, or is that what
Yeah,
you're saying?
that's that old
Connected to
building.
the
It's
Donegan
connected to it.
It's just connected to the Donegan building. It's been sitting empty.
Yep.
Oh,
If you look at the
What
building,
about-
if you
I'm
if you
sorry.
come out of the hardware store and you look at it, it's right off to the left.
Mhm.
It looks like
There's
it's
like a
it's
bell.
an
oh, I'm not
after
talking about the one
fact.
on 90. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
there's
No,
a-
no, no. So
I was
it's
like,
the
I just
old
went there.
doctor's office, not the one where there's actually a doctor there currently practicing.
yeah.
They leave?
Yeah.
That's
Two different
what I'm saying.
His workshop, right, at one point?
It used to say Santa's workshop at
Yeah.
one point.
So that's another, somebody brought up the other day. We could easily, they make projecting type stuff now. Like for Christmas, we could have that set up where it projects through the windows and it looks like the elves are up there doing that kind of stuff. There's a lot of stuff we could do with it to make it kind of an attraction for people to take pictures to,
Well, a
Anybody's
lot of-
watching
a
this
lot of
video,
the-
don't let your kids see this part.
yeah, right?
A lot of the kids they'll take prom pictures in front
Yep.
We already
of
are on it.
the stairs because of the way that they're shaped.
Right, right.
So
Mhm.
I mean, that could be a pretty big significant deal for
Right.
everyone involved.
Right.
I know revitalization of downtown has definitely been high on my priority list. I mean, going way back before you and I even decided to run for council. It's just, I lived in my previous life, lived in Conroe, and I was a part of the creation of the, what was it called? Experience Historic Downtown Conroe Association. And they never wanted to change the name. I don't know why. But just in terms of starting like the farmer's market down there, we had, once again, they already had the amphitheater that was built in downtown Conroe, but they would have live cover bands come out and do free Friday night concerts, I think it was, throughout the summer. They had the Christmas event that was out there. That started to attract more retail businesses into the historic downtown Conroe area because for years and years, it was primarily law offices, since you were right there around the county seat. And then I lived in College Station for a little while, and one of the favorite things out there with the city of Bryan was First Fridays. Same thing. You had, live music throughout the area. Retail businesses ran specials. Some of the restaurants down there would even have like First Friday specials. Excuse me. Wolf Pen Creek Park in College Station, same thing. They would do free concert series in the summers and things like that. So to me, I think with the opportunity that we have to purchase this property and to turn it into something that is, I think, fun. Like, we need some things that are just fun for families to do and for young couples to do. And those are the things that are going to attract people to the area. The biggest thing too that I think that we have to keep in mind is the revitalization of downtown. I mean, if you drive down 90, right, if you just go up here and take a left right now, the majority of those the historic storefronts are empty. And we need to figure out how we can attract quality retail there. Maybe something that's mom and pop owned, not necessarily chain always. I'm not saying that chain is bad, but those are the things that are going to put Brookshire on a map. Like we've said, we're being surrounded as it is. We're going to get swallowed up. Berkshire's growing. We can't stop it at this point. And I know Mr. Hill and I have met with a couple of real estate developers already, residential real estate developers. And y'all, the number of homes that are coming within a 3-mile proximity to here is huge. And if they can get past the discussions with the water district, but
What are the thoughts on bringing a decent restaurant into town? So, I mean, if they're going to play
it's the
here,
same thing. It's the water district
water
is
district?
usually, yeah. And in fact, Ms. Casto, before I forget, I need to speak with you this evening about a restaurant here that's already, that I think I may want to connect you with. So FYI. But it's usually the water district holdup because of their excise and use fees, and the application is like.
Yeah.
If I may add something, I had the owner, Mr. Diaz, that owns the strip where the doctor's office is on 90. He had a customer, or had a client that wanted to rent the other end of that building out. And I'm gonna say it was like an ice cream shop. And he called me really upset because he lost the client, because the water department wanted to charge them $20,000 for a meter that's already there.
Oh, yeah.
And so he lost that customer, and we lost the business because of.
We've heard that story so many times. It's just,
It's
it's like a business vacates a location and a new one moves in, and all they want to do is open up an account, and it's like $2,500, and it's.
Well, that's like the tie-ins were, up in excess of $45,000
Yeah.
for a water tie-in, and it's.
And then even whenever, so if you have a retail space, I'm just thinking of, like there's one restaurant in particular in Conroe. It's called Brick Tavern. They've been wildly successful. They took an old building, revitalized it, opened it. Now they do live music on certain nights and just wonderful food. They have like an actual chef there. And but they had a community that was willing to work with them. And if you look at the buildings that are here, if somebody were to take one of those and revitalize that building and try to convert it into a restaurant, just like you said, the fees to put a meter or to open an account, an excise and use fee, I don't even want to think about what a restaurant would have to pay in order to dig and put a grease trap, because it's now a restaurant. And these are things that I think small businesses, whenever you're looking at it, well, if they receive an initial investment of X amount of dollars and they're talking about double-digit percentages of their opening budget just to take care of those things, it doesn't make sense. Or, are there certain grants that we as the EDC could look into to try to help these businesses?
Yeah.
Segue to Mr. Barnes.
I just don't think we
Um,
be idle or just sit by and say that's
No,
okay.
absolutely. And I was reading through, I think it was a previous report from Mr. Barnes, and just looking at some of the different grant monies. I can't recall that a lot of those grant monies have been used by a previous board.
Yeah.
I haven't heard of any businesses that have exercised some of the grant monies that are available.
I don't think that. Do they know about that grant money exists?
I don't know.
Probably not.
That would be my concern would be they were not made aware.
Well, let's talk about what that looks like, because I do know at one time the EDC board was giving grants, but there wasn't much accountability on, I'm going to say this, not Ms. Casto, so she doesn't get her hand slapped by somebody. There wasn't much accountability on what actually happened with that money.
Right.
And sometimes the businesses went out of business pretty quickly, and that money just
It's fair.
went with them. Do you want to chime in on kind of some of the discussion on the aesthetics of downtown and what we can do to help with that situation?
will plead guilty to expediting, help me, Miss Vicky, because I'm falling, expediting the demise of the previous grant monies that the EDC used to implement. And I helped expedite the demise on the basis of what Mr. Hill referenced was accountability. I mean, it was like open up a window and put a stack of money and then turn the fan on. There was no accountability to speak of, and more importantly, no significant change in the appearance or the aesthetics. What I'm a strong believer in is back-end incentives. Those incentives are available in downtown as well as other locations in the community. One of the ways, you know, if a downtown business or a downtown property owner were to come in, purchase a building, upgrade that building, let's say through $500,000 toward the upfit of that building, we could do the same thing with that building that we did with Benito, if you will, Mr. Aguilar, who was here before. We could, at last meeting, we could provide recommendations to council, because it has to be approved ultimately by council, for tax abatements, etc. One of the things that I've always found frustrating in my career is, let's say we find someone that goes in and invests $1 million into a property or a series of properties in downtown Brookshire. And in that investment is an enhancement of that property. The first thing that property owner gets is an increased tax bill, which is almost up at him for improving the building. I think we could definitely promote the ability of certain tax incentives within the downtown. Now, the reality is they have to do something in order to receive the incentive. Equally in my experience, the downtown, I hope none of you own downtown properties, the most eccentric aggregation of mankind in every market I've ever worked own downtown properties. They are very unique, that's a stereotype, and I usually don't get into stereotypes, but it's based on empirical observation. They many times don't want to enhance the building. They don't want to make it available for sale or lease. They just hold on to it. A lot of times you've got absentee ownership, which can be very challenging. It would be ideal, and I think we'll probably talk about this, and you will in the budget, if you remember that comprehensive plan remark about strategy. I saw very little benefit, in all candor, to the downtown grants or the business grants that the EDC did. I saw uselessness, to be brutally candid with you. From my perspective, I think if, for example, one of the tools that could be used, particularly if it's a restaurateur, is the 380 for rebate of sales tax. That can be done today. And the city and the EDC can both participate in that. If I were a restaurateur, I would look today very skeptically at a downtown Brookshire location. And I think hopefully Mr. Hill will confirm that I don't think too dissimilarly than most of the developers that he's interacted with, or that we've interacted with since he's come on here. And I think there are a lot of reasons that downtown Brookshire is not a great investment today for a restaurant.
It's ugly.
What's that?
It's ugly.
That would be one of them. One, you know, on the other hand,
You're the exception.
I tried.
boy, did,
She's
you
the
know,
one
can
that
I
owns the
hide?
building.
I
I'm
have
batting
the
over
only
3
pretty
with
building
you.
on 90.
It's true.
It's the only pretty one, but we've tried.
The reality is, if we were to provide some 380 assistance on rebate of some sales tax, you could couple that with, you know, I'm pretty good at packaging, at the risk of appearing immodest, with some other sort of tax abatement benefits, rather than discourage folks, we could encourage them. And I think a marketing campaign along those lines, again, it's budget related, could help. The reality is, who knows what the landowners and property owners will or will not do. That's the impediment right now to a broader retail strategy. There's the best retail site in my mind in town. I can't get any traction. Thought we were making some headway, but we don't seem to be. Downtowns are unique. I think it could be with some public investment, with you know, enhanced security, enhanced appearances, that things could happen there. You've got a growth in your population as evidenced by the line of developers that are going to be doing residential development. You know, those folks aren't particularly interested in having to drive to Katy, whichever direction it is, that way I guess, somewhere, to go out to dinner or to shop. They're going, those rooftops will demand, and the residents therein will demand services, and the services will follow. In the interim, we can set a tone, that famous phrase, user-friendly, where, hey, look, if you invest, we're not gonna immediately hit you with a larger tax bill. I mean, it's absurd to think like that, but governments think like that. So, you know, combine a marketing strategy, do some public improvements to the appearance on the public side, enhance code enforcement to address your observation, ma'am. I think it can be done. And then if I understand, you know, the process were to come about for the building, what I call the museum property, and an amphitheater, there's a reason to be there. Not unlike the First Fridays. You know, I live outside, I live in the suburbs, I'm joking, of a town of 1,200 people, less than 2,000 people. You know, it's not, so I live in rural America of sorts. But every Friday night, some of the best musicians in the hill country gather on the town square. And we're talking about guys that have, you know, mailbox money that from songs they've written and recorded and so forth. That, you know, it happens. Activity breeds activity. Rule number 2 in economic development. I think it could be done. I think it has to be strategically done. I would not encourage any body, not anybody, but any public body to throw good money after bad. And that's kind of how I read the table 11 years ago. And sort of moved away from just throwing money in the wind with, you know, no performance agreements, no, you know, I understand one of the parties bought inventory, which was not particularly helpful to the appearance of the downtown. I'll shut up, but I hope I've at least, you know, there are ways that we can today do some incentives to make that work, particularly on retail with sales tax rebates. Same kind of thing. You're gonna invest in retail, and the first thing we're gonna do is clip you. Why don't, instead of clip you, why don't we think about some refunds back into your business? I do this, in a lot of places that we work. Questions, comments?
So that was a yes to what we stated. You agree with everything we were talking about?
I beg your
I said,
pardon?
you're agreeing with everything we were talking about?
Mostly.
Went around it the long way. I'm kind of
Uh,
just give it to me.
I just,
Snatch the Band-Aid off.
I would urge you in your zeal to proceed businesslike. That's all. Because there's no doubt in my mind that when these were originally established, before my arrival here, that the intent was positive. The follow-up left a lot to be desired.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, I have had absolutely nothing to do with the parks here, other than being a meeting when they were discussed. But I did have a thought, which is scary, I know, a random thought. In former times, I'm baiting and switching you. In former times, the TML offered what I'm going to call co-op buying or TML preferred buying. I never even thought of that until we were talking about the parks.
Yeah.
Do they still?
They're preferred vendors of TML.
Is it worth to take a look at those vendors for your proposed park improvements? I've been a fairly strong advocate for getting us out of the park business forever. Simultaneous and concurrently, I understand the city doesn't have much money to do parks. So my caution to folks, particularly to your president, was if you pull this money out, where does the other money come from? And I've not been at all involved in the parks. My focus has been the pure, business industrial side. But I caution you again, don't throw the baby out with the bath, so to speak. If we can wind up those parks, I say we collectively, you guys, you make the policy, as I think Mr. Hill is proposing, get it off your plate, but leave it in a much better place than was found. That's good. Then all the city has to do, I say all, and it's not, may I editorialize, I don't think it's been done very well, is to maintain it.
Mm-hmm.
Things like maintenance schedules. What a novel thought. Timely repairs. Security. It's a big issue. We build them up and they get torn down. And we pay to have cameras that I don't think anybody looks at the video.
They're installed backwards too, if you look at them.
It is what it is.
They literally are.
But we can do downtown. I can help put together any kind of reasonable business-like incentives to dovetail downtown projects. I'm confident of that.
All right, so let's talk some numbers, and we're not going to accomplish everything tonight, but let's talk some numbers. I went and looked at the EDCs. I'm going to define this as our carryover budget from what we have existing. Unfortunately, the last bank reconciliation I have is from May of 2022. So we're a few months behind, but is what it is. At that point, we had almost $1.1 million in the bank. What I'm suggesting we do, and this is kind of hard to see, is consider holding back $200,000 of that for any outstanding obligations that we're unaware of. I don't think there should be anywhere near $200,000, but just to be on the safe side, is consider pulling that money back. When you add in the sales tax deposits we should have for May, June, July, August, and September, That puts us at 1.270,923.96. So I'm suggesting we consider our carryover for this new budget of 1.2 million. So that would leave essentially 270 that we're going to essentially leave just in case of outstanding expenditures. Now, where that becomes an interesting discussion point to have is this stuff that we've talked about. What does that actually look like in terms of real cost? And these are some preliminary numbers. Do not hold me to this. Some of these are more solid than others, and we're working to kind of get a better grasp on this. I kind of looked at some of the stuff that we know needs to be done and kind of earmarked it as phase 1, 2, 3 projects, meaning year 1, year 2, year 3. Some of them could flex into year 2. Some of them could flex, a couple of years there. If we were to look at doing a painting of the exterior of City Hall, as well as adding some downtown lighting, adding the amphitheater potentially across the street, updating the, fixing the exterior of the museum, repurposing the doctor's office into a welcome center / EDC office, and then Hovis Park fence replacement, Bostic Park fence replacement, new playground equipment for both parks, and potentially the Bostic Park parking lot. We're looking at, the screen's not quite, taking that 1.2, deducting all that, having $154,000 left over. So right at $1 million in our carryover could be spent towards these projects, give or take. Again, we're working on more solid numbers that we can actionably go off of, which leaves us with essentially this year's expected budget of $800,000 in income up for debate on how we spend it.
Right.
Marketing, what other improvements we could make as far as trying to help some of these downtown businesses improve their aesthetics through rebates and things like that. So we've got some room to play is where I guess I'm going if there is a consensus that we want to start moving in this direction.
So if we move into this direction, our carryover budget would take care of the major things that we've just discussed tonight. And then we can look at like some of the actual expenditures from 2019. I'm looking at this sheet right now. When you look at some of the actual expenditures and how their budgeted items fluctuated drastically.
Correct.
Like they had city parks projects actual starting out at 75,000 down to 16,000, then way high jump up to 510. We could essentially eliminate that.
Correct. So, we have some room to discuss on what we do. There's some changes I'm going to say are going to be mandated in this budget. Unfortunately, I'm having a hard time getting the city to provide me the detail breakdown of what expenses were there. There's some items we know are going to go off this immediately. Like I'm not even,
Yeah.
it's just going to go to the wayside. But we have some room to move and some room to get serious about advertising, about, doing this kind of stuff. And so in this budget right here, if you look at this column kind of right here where it says Jeremiah proposed, the $800,000, which is our sales tax projected roughly, $1,700 in interest earned, and then the 1.2 carryover essentially is a $2 million budget for the year. So we start going through, and I'm carrying over a lot of these items at the moment. Some of them I have reduced. I went ahead and added in the parks, essentially 657 there. Facilities infrastructure, that was the difference in those projects from the previous screen, which was painting, that kind of stuff. It still leaves us with about $651,000 to discuss what we're going to do with. Now, I say that not to say we're going to spend all $651,000. Don't get me wrong. But my point is we have some room to move.
Make some good improvements.
And so it'll be a start for year one. Then we look at, during this year one, discussing the business attraction incentives, developing those relationships, trying to get certain attractiveness for retail.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm asking for is not a vote, but a general, are we in consensus? This is the direction we would like to head, and we'd like to get some better numbers put together so we can kind of formalize what a budget would look like.
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Who is, the convention center?
That's the
Are they going, who's gonna be
portion.
fixing it? Who's gonna be fixing
So
it?
I'm suggesting just for
I think they'll
aesthetics,
fix it. I don't know who over.
So the problem, I'll just give you maybe a little bit of background. So the convention center was, the city council was supposed to be receiving bids for the repairs of the convention center. That include, I mean, the main thing was the bathroom and the convention center, and then I think the latest was like some of this stuff here.
Mhm.
But the previous city council is the one that originally initiated that, but they've been going back and forth on receiving bids for the better part of, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Hill, like 2 years.
pre-COVID.
Yes, going back and forth with bids. One bid is the only one that has ever been received. And I know even prior to our election, when we were just an audience, we were trying to positively influence, say, hey, we shouldn't just accept one bid. To date, if you look on the city website, there's still nothing on open bids on our website. So that the bid for that job still has yet to been posted. However, in recent light, what we found out is because it's dealing with the nature of the bathrooms that are non-ADA compliant, while we were going out for bids to have all these repairs made, was actually putting the cart before the horse. We actually have to have an architect involved in it because they have to come in and do measurements and do drawings and submit them to the state for approval before we can even move forward on that project. So now that we've wasted 2 years,
Yep. So
On
to
this whole
short answer
process.
that, what I'm proposing is we look at just the outside aesthetics. The city, and we've kind of started having this
we've had the
discussion.
conversation, yeah.
The
Somebody's
roof,
working on it.
We're working
Yeah.
on it. It's just that some
I
things are
didn't know
just,
somebody's working on it.
the
slower
roof has to be
process.
Money
fixed.
making right there.
Yep,
That's
the roof has to
going
be fixed, which
that's on this next meeting.
I had a couple companies come out last week, and we actually have addressed the issue, and now it just needs to be sealed up. And so the city will be voting on that fairly soon.
Like next meeting, I think.
It's on there
Yeah,
if it made
well.
it to the agenda. And then the city has hotel motel tax that they collect, which should be used for the promotion of tourism, that kind of stuff, right? Heads to beds is the term you'll hear. That money should be what's being used to get the convention center taken care of.
Correct.
And so the goal would be simultaneously, while we're working on all this, the city would have a renewed focus of getting that taken care of. So,
Functioning.
you know, in theory, somebody could have a wedding out there at the amphitheater and the reception in, you know, the convention center.
Mhm.
It gives us options, but it just needs to be fixed. So it's on the docket. That would not be us. The only reason I'm suggesting the outside, and that's not, again, that's one of 7, is just for the aesthetics, so that we know it gets done, and we can probably move a little bit faster than what the city's going to move forward with on doing the other.
I'm so disgusted with that. I am.
You should hear our council executive sessions.
Well, I
Really.
just think that's, we wanna make money,
Correct.
that's a money
Correct.
making machine
No,
right
and
there.
It is.
That point has
That's
been made
crazy.
several times, is that it's a potential revenue stream that's been sitting there for more than 2 years now, and it's no longer acceptable.
I need it. I need to book it, so I need to
I mean, it never was acceptable, you know
get
what I mean?
going.
No longer tolerated, I should say.
All right, so any other thoughts right now?
Sorry.
The column request BD from city, what does that mean?
Budget detail from city. These are areas that I've said I want to know what's going on in there. What exactly has been spent. So for example, I will give you business incentive. We spent $2,500 and I have no clue what for. We've done maybe
This year.
this year. That's actual year-to-date expended. They budgeted 3,000.
and
Ms.
the
Casto
past.
can attest, they've probably done 2 or 3 ribbon cuttings, which is about $100 a piece. That's $300. So where's the other $22-ish hundred?
Okay, so that's, you're still looking into that. And then
Correct.
That hit the account, we don't know what it's for, but in 2019, what was it for? It was for the ribbon cuttings?
That's exactly
There's
the point.
no way.
We don't know.
Like I said, I'm asking for the breakdown.
Yeah, because I mean, like you're talking about
Checks and
doing
balances. Great.
business incentives during
No,
COVID.
100%. Well, and even like advertising and promotion, we go from 25,000 down to 12 up to 60 budgeted, and then 32,000 is actual.
So this
The
is,
majority of that was the
Yep.
business retention celebration.
correct.
Uh-huh.
The vast majority of that's the December event.
What? Yeah, and I'm curious.
I said, what was they serving?
Who's spending
They
$10,000
was-
a year
they
on
had it
telephone?
catered and it
I
was-
hate
Yeah,
care.
I'll
Was
see.
that the?
That is,
Tablet.
I went, I ain't
That's-
gonna lie.
13 tablets that are out there.
Candy and crackers,
what was it? I need to know.
All right, guys,
Chicken, stuffed chicken, and
let's rein it back in.
No, ma'am.
fish. It wasn't no-
Yeah, it wasn't,
The $10,000 on that is 13 tablets, a cell phone, and I don't think we pay for the desk
Are we
phone.
getting tablets?
Where are those tablets at?
We're still waiting on those
Are we
tablets.
getting tablets?
We have
Well,
three.
We have 3 of 13,
3 of 13.
correct? And I've asked
I need 13.
So the
that
city's been using them?
Purchased.
a combination of, at this moment, we don't know where they're at. Let's put it that way.
For the record, I never
Come on. Pat him down, Vicky, pat him down.
And what is
Your address,
frustrating,
We're going to look in your closet.
what is frustrating is I sent a directive, as y'all know, we voted to move to Gunderson Bookkeeping to manage our books moving forward September 1. The city will have to close out the books because they've been the ones touching it. I don't want Gunderson touching
Correct.
somebody else's work. I've asked for the authorization to be made because one individual at the city is the authorized person on these Verizon and Sprint accounts to authorize myself and or Ms. Casto to become the authorized representative. And to date, that has not happened.
Isn't the mayor that person's boss?
Correct.
Yes,
So I don't
ma'am.
understand what the problem is.
So
I don't
we're,
understand.
I'll just let you know, there's probably going to be some things that go on with that pretty soon.
You still kept the 10K on there in the budget because you think we're still gonna be obligated
Well,
to keep paying this?
Because I don't know what the breakdown is of what actually is actual, like Ms. Casto's phone I'm okay with. The tablets personally I'd like to see go away.
Yeah.
And I don't know what we pay for her desktop phone. So for the moment, it's there because I just don't know.
I could understand if we were doing a deal like pay per gigabyte of data and we were all given one when we go to travel or like to go to meetings with people.
These are data devices.
Then that's acceptable, but to be
One
currently
individual is
paying-
doing 60 gigabytes of data a month on their tablet.
Is the city gonna reimburse us?
There's going to be a few things I'm going to present to the
We
city
need-
for
we need a
reimbursement.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
We need a refund. That's $10,000.
Yep. To give y'all another example,
I'll be here all night.
there was a copier that was purchased that we've
That was
been
what?
paying,
Wait, what?
a copier that was purchased without board approval that we can find, a copier,
Like
to the
big
tune of we're
units.
paying about $500 a month in maintenance.
Is it one of
And-
the ones that has a
excuse me,
lease on it?
$500 a month. No, we've evidently paid for the copier in full.
So it's not like one of the ones where you lease it and they maintain the toner and the repairs and every,
We also bought an
Where's
$800,
this copier at?
we also bought an $800 scanner, or someone did, and we're paying $720 a year for a maintenance contract on it,
Where's that scanner at? Where's this copier?
sitting in Ms. Castro's office right now.
I brought both of them to the office.
Finally.
So there are going to be several things that we're looking at of going,
I didn't even know that they existed.
Crazy.
I think just based on the preliminary numbers that you've projected here, Mr. Hill, based on what we have to carry over, what I think that we're kind of in consensus that we're moving in the right direction, leaving, 600,000 left over, I think would be a nice cushion so that we don't overextend ourselves. But then whenever we start getting into trimming the fat, I think we may have,
there's going to be some stuff that changes.
yes, we'll have even more opportunities, I think, available to us. Is there some sort of way that we can earmark items that would be maybe like flex spending or something as things come up, as development happens? Or is it things that we have to earmark and plan for now?
Maybe. Basically, what I'll do from here
Okay.
is I'm trying to get more solid numbers on all the stuff we've kind of discussed. And then I'll sit back down with Mr. Barnes and say, okay, let's talk about advertising and promotion, some of this recruiting type stuff. What's a realistic number to spend? Is
When
that,
I know we mentioned switching to the
10,000 a good
quarterly
number?
events.
well, and so that'll be part of that advertising and marketing
Right.
category. But is the $10,000 you projected a good number? Should we flex plus or minus? There's going to be a few more things. This is not going to be the final budget. This is really for discussion and getting us
Understandable.
consensus and moving a direction. And then, again, me and Mr. Barnes can do some work behind the scenes to narrow us down a little bit more. And then we're going to have another workshop specifically just on the final proposed budget. And then kind of go from there.
Okay.
Will work for y'all? All
Is
right.
there any way we can put some check, are there gonna be process to put checks and balances in place moving forward?
I have asked our city attorney to draw up financial policies.
This
Um,
is crazy.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, And our secondary checks and balance is gonna be an outside bookkeeping company, because every invoice, everything will go to them to pay. So that's gonna kind of be another layer outside of this board viewing everything. That's gonna be another layer that's in place. And, you know, I don't doubt Miss Casto could be fully capable of doing that at some point, but she's about to have a lot of stuff on her plate with all this stuff we've got going on. And so that was our smart move, is let's outsource it. Let's let somebody, that's all they do. And it's not that, it was 300 something a month, you know. I'd rather spend $300 for peace of mind than spend $800 on a scanner and $720 on maintenance. Just my opinion there. So, all right, with that, is there any other discussion on that? Or am I free to kind of get with Mr. Barnes and get y'all a better?
One fast question, is the
Yes, ma'am.
current forensic investigation, does that delve into any of these financials?
It will absolutely go through
Perfect.
any
When does that
funds.
start? What is it?
Outstanding.
Has it already started?
It's
City
already started.
council passed a
Yeah.
forensic investigation several,
3 weeks ago?
Yep.
month and a half
Yeah.
ago.
It's in
I just wanted to know
It's in
process.
the process right now, but it's gonna take some time to complete.
Oh, okay.
It'll go through every
But it will cover these financials.
every
You said
penny
that's
that's
why
been
the scanner
spent.
showed up?
Yeah,
Is that why the scanner and the
The
copier
scanner showed up because I started asking a bunch of questions.
That normally happens.
If you ask enough questions, people start
But
throwing.
where
In the
was,
copier.
who was using them?
There's no security cameras.
It was in a city employee's office.
We need a
sure,
refund. They
but-
to keep that and give us our money.
No, but
That's
only-
what I
So-
say. Are you gonna use that scanner and that copier?
I've got a scanner just like
Then we don't need that. The city needs to keep it and pay us for it.
Those are going to be the next steps that we're working on. Trust me. Yeah.
I'm gonna go to the microphone as a member of the public. Congratulate you on your perspective.
They need to keep that and pay us for it. They need to pay us our $10,000
Yeah,
back.
reimburse us for all those phones.
It's all of that. No. No, no,
Alrighty.
no, yes.
Agenda item number 8, adjournment. Do I have a motion?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
We got to go.
Thank y'all for y'all's
Yeah, I
time.
gotta be up at